Good evening to everyone and welcome. This is ECCB Digital Dialogues. As we think about national recovery plans, as we work and craft regional recovery plans, the issue of food security should feature very prominently. This evening, I'm pleased to advise you that we have an expert panel to explore this issue of food security. And our objective tonight would be to identify some key action points that we can deploy as we address the issue of national and domestic and regional food security, improve our health, and build resilience in our region. And so you're going to hear from our panel shortly. As always, the dialogue has a 3-segment format. First, I will pose some questions to the panel. That's the first segment. The second segment is where we have a poll, and you get to answer tonight. I believe we have 4 questions, and that's always an exciting and interactive segment. And our third and final segment is our longest, where you get to pose your questions and to get answers. And so, again, we're very pleased to be discussing this very important topic of food security in the Eastern Caribbean. And I want to thank all of you who've joined us tonight. And now, I'd like to introduce our panel. First up is Honourable Saboto Caesar, Minister for Agriculture, Rural Development, among other things, in the Government of Saint Vincent and the Grenadines. Minister Caesar is also a former Minister of Tourism. He's a lawyer by profession, a community activist, but he's more than just minister in the Government of Saint Vincent and the Grenadines. He's not only the lead for food security in the Government of Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, but he's also the lead minister for food security in the OECS. And I know he's also leading many of the initiatives in the wider CARICOM area. So we're very, very pleased to have Minister Caesar tonight. Minister, good evening and welcome.
A pleasant evening to you, my dear brother, Governor Antoine. Pleasant evening.
Thank you very much, sir. It's great to see you. Wonderful to have you on board. Very good. I now want to introduce Ms. Theresa Marshall. And Ms. Marryshow hails from Grenada. She's actually a retired agricultural officer. She's a very active farmer, and she will tell you her first love is, in fact, farming. But more than that, Ms. Marryshow leads several initiatives at the community or grassroots level in the area of farming. One of them at the moment is the Grenada Rural Organization for Female Producers or Women Producers, which she leads. And she has a very rich perspective. And I'm very pleased to have not just a bona fide farmer, but a woman farmer on our panel tonight. Ms. Marryshow, good evening and welcome. Good evening and welcome. Can you unmute your mic?
You hearing me now?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Okay, Governor, good evening, and thank you to be part of the panel.
Wonderful, great, we'll hear from you soon. And then last but by no means least is Mr. Daniel Atherton, an entrepreneur farmer. Danny, as we like to call him because he's a retired central banker, is a farmer who experiments with different technologies. He does open field, he does hydroponics, he does a number of things. But beyond his farming, which is of course his first love, Danny has also consulted on SME development across our region, working with various governments and international and regional organizations over many years. Danny actually is from the island of Nevis and farms on the island of Nevis in the Federation of Saint Kitts and Nevis. Danny, good evening and welcome to you.
Good evening, Governor, and good evening to all of our viewing audience. Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to serve.
Very good, as usual. Thank you very much. So there you have it. colleagues and friends, listeners, viewers, this is our panel, and we will now proceed with the first segment where we will pose some questions. I want to start with Minister Caesar. Food security. We hear this term all the time, and of course, it's come to the fore during this pandemic. And as I understand it, food security is a multidimensional concept that is also linked to health. Minister Caesar, what is food security? Break that down for us, if you will.
First of all, I want to say a pleasant evening to all the citizens of the sub-region and persons who are following us in the diaspora. It's definitely a privilege and an honor to be invited to address such an important issue. Food security simply is the ability of a country, a state, or a region to feed itself. Over the period of the pandemic, we have witnessed a break in the supply chain for several different food items and commodities which are imported into the region. And because of that, it has placed significant pressure in some areas of commodity supply in the marketplace in the sub-region. When you look at the issue of food security, there are three fundamental tenets. The first one has to do with the availability of food, the accessibility of food, and the affordability of food. And I'll just go through quickly these three very important features of food security. Food availability simply means that the food has to be physically available. So it has to be produced and physically available to the citizens. It has to be accessible, means that it has to be transported from point A to point B, or citizens have to be able to go to the areas of production, the farm gate, or to the market and access the food. So there is a situation whereby food can be available but not accessible. I know, for example, in some of the member states, even though we are small and we're small island developing states, there are differences in terms of the accessibility of food even on a small island. And I'll give an example from Grenada. I'm certain that on any day there would always be more fish in Guave than in St. David. Similarly in Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, on the leeward side of the island where we have most of our fisherfolk, and in the Grenadines, even though we are a small island state, you're going to have places right here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that do not have as great access to fish as the leeward side of the island and the Grenadines. So we are seeing that food could be available, but not accessible. And the third point is the affordability. You could have a situation where food is available on an island, it is accessible in the supermarkets, at the farm gate, but the price is so high because of the scales of production that it basically closes out a significant percentage of the population from being able to purchase different baskets of goods. So in a nutshell, when you're addressing the issue of food security, it is of first importance that food is available, it is accessible, and that it is affordable. And as a policymaker, those are the three features that you always try to address and to keep them in the positive.
Right. Minister, thank you for that excellent setting up the table, as it were. I feel like eating some fish now, having spoken about fish. But you raised some very important points, and we hope to explore those, because very often in our region, when we talk about buying local and eating local, the issue of affordability arises. And people will often tell you that the imports are cheaper, and it's a pocketbook issue. So I hope we will be able to get into that a bit more as we look at how we could actually, as you put it, make food accessible, available, accessible, and affordable. So thank you very much for that. And I want to stay with you, Minister, for a little longer and ask you this question. In the very early days of the pandemic, we witnessed panic buying, long lines at supermarkets across our currency union and beyond. So as lead Minister for Food Security in the OECS, could you please share with us some of the steps that are being taken by our governments to enhance national and regional food security?
I want to first recognize the hard work, the dedication, and the diligence of the OECS Secretariat. And I particularly want to mention Dr. Didicus Jules and the very important role that he has played very early in the pandemic to ensure that we had a focus on issues touching and concerning food security. So the first thing we did in the sub-region is that we organized a meeting of all the ministers of agriculture. And we looked at the issue, one, the risk of having very important food supply chains cut off from the OECS. We identified several areas, and of course, poultry was one of those areas because we are significant importers of poultry and poultry products from the United States of America. And what was taking place in the United States of America, and to some extent in the United Kingdom, was that large companies were shutting down because the large number of persons that they have working as it relates to production was over the protocols advised in the pandemic. So where you had production centers of 300 and 400 and 500 persons, they had to whittle them down to about 20 persons. And then you realize that the division of labor was so stretched that it was more feasible and viable to close the company. And the focus then was on the distribution of poultry and poultry products within the United States of America and United Kingdom. So the ministers of agriculture in the OECS, what we did was to first of all provide the data of what commodities we had available and when they would be ready for the market and the prices. Quickly, we established a digital framework whereby we were able to share the information using and utilizing the human resource capacity at the OECS Secretariat so that persons throughout the different member states of the OECS were then aware, and I'm speaking buyers, consumers, and also wholesalers, and importantly, those persons who were transporting the goods were aware of the critical need to move food within the sub-region. So the first thing we did was to gather the data, we studied the information, we exchanged the information, and the second issue that we addressed is the one of intra-regional trade. So the entire sub-region was poised to see a very fluid movement of commodities on a sub-regional platform, utilizing the technology and utilizing all the factors of production that we have at our disposal, being coordinated at the center from the OECS Secretariat, so that we ensured that throughout this period, the OECS remained food secure. And we identified during this period that there were some member states, of course, because of its geography, its history, its cultural production, that had certain advantages in producing certain commodities. For example, we know the strength of Saint Vincent and the Grenadines as it pertains to livestock production. We are aware of the strength of Grenada as it pertains to spices. We know that Dominica is a heavyweight, not only in the OECS, but in CARICOM, as it touches and concerns the production of root crops. And every single member state in the OECS, we identified what were the strengths and the weaknesses so that we can match supply and demand. And we had our airlines in place, and we also had the marine transportation organized. Of course, the airports for the most part were closed, but we had discussions very early with LIAT so that if there was the opportunity or the need to move cargo, that would be available. So I just want to announce to all the citizens in the sub-region that even though we had globally a significant shutdown in some areas as it pertains to the supply chains for food that we hitherto import, that in the OECS, we always maintained a high level of food security. Of course, in some member states, you spoke about the long lines, so that is an issue of accessibility. But food was always available. Accessibility was an issue, and I do not have significant reports about any inflation, marked inflation in the cost of food because of availability and accessibility. It is simply an issue whereby, because of the protocols advised by each member state so that you can practice your social distancing, that you had a slow progression by citizens who were going to purchase. Therefore, you had these very long lines. But it wasn't that the supermarket shelves were empty. It wasn't that Saint Vincent and the Grenadines could not supply the entire sub-region with poultry, with livestock. It wasn't that they didn't have enough fish from the tuna boats in Grenada. It was simply an issue of getting to the supermarket shelves.
Right. Thank you, Minister Caesar. And I'm really grateful for you laying out a lot of the behind-the-scenes work that we would not have seen, but that you and your colleague ministers of agriculture, in conjunction and supported by the OECS Commission, took to ensure food security for our region. And so we have a basis on which to proceed. And of course, we're talking about the pandemic, but this could also be true for a hurricane or any other disruptive event where we have a disruption in food in the supply chains. And we need to make sure that we continue to make food available, accessible, and affordable. So thank you, Minister. Let me turn to our female farmer, Ms. Marryshow. Now, our data show that while the regional economy as a whole has grown by almost, I believe, tripled, in fact, over the last 40 years, agriculture and fishing combined have only grown by about 13%. So the global economy, the regional economy has grown, tripled over the last 40 years. But when you look at agriculture and fishing as a, if you will, a subsector or a sector, that has only grown by 13%. And our food import bill as a region last year was 1.6 billion EC dollars. So my question to Ms. Marryshow is, from your experience as a farmer, what are some of the challenges that are contributing, in your estimation, to food insecurity in our region?
Thank you, Governor. With my experience working with farmers and working with the Ministry of Agriculture as a whole, the challenges that are faced for food insecurity are, we will look firstly at what causes food insecurity. And the food insecurity is caused by food scarcity, food not affordable, and food that not adequate, or it is not available at the time that it should be. And breaking it down further, we could look at production and productivity, because food insecurity should start from production, because once you don't have production and productivity, you will have the challenge of food insecurity. And food production should look at not only planting food, but the way it is planted. There should be a sequence in planting the food. It should be scheduled so that you have a certain amount of farmers doing a certain amount of crops. Let us say you have 10 farmers doing tomatoes, you have about 20 doing cabbages, and then you put them on a planting schedule basis. So that will able to have a continuity of food that should be available. So this contributes, when you don't have this in place, it contributes to food insecurity. Another aspect for food insecurity is marketing. Marketing is one of the main problems with food insecurity, because you will have some food and then you have glut at some time, scarcity at that some time. And when you're looking at marketing, you have to look at what contributes to the marketing. You have to look at transportation, timely transportation, adequate transportation. You're supposed to have cool room, because if you don't have a chill room and you have a glut, you don't have nowhere to store the food. So you're supposed to have all this in place. Then we look at incentive to farmers. That again contributes to is a challenge to food insecurity. Because if you don't have appropriate incentive to farmers, yes, incentives might be available, but is it appropriate to the farmer? So you need to put a package that is affordable and workable, so that the farmer could able to get engaged in production and productivity. Pre-elasticity again is a big challenge, because as we are aware that it's in the whole region, not in Grenada alone, but we have a big problem with pre-elasticity. Pre-elasticity again contributes to food insecurity. Another aspect is our local germplasm. We need to have our local germplasm in the countries so that we're able to have our own local planting material. And the pandemic had shown us that we need to have our own food, that we need to eat what we grow and grow what we eat. So germplasm, vibrant, established germplasm with all the various crops that we are doing, we're able to establish that. And I think that is lacking in Grenada. I don't know for much of the region, but I know for Grenada, we need to have a very good, vibrant germplasm. Agro-processing, because if we have glut, again, and you don't have the small agro-processors, the women that are doing agro-processing, we need to have an established agro-processing system. Maybe we could start up with cottage industry, and then you grow gradually, and where you could have established processing system. We have some female farmers in Grenada, the Grenada Network of Rural Women. They are very vibrant with the agro-processing. We have another group in St. Mark's. They're now doing sun-dried tomatoes for the hotel. So once we have the assistance given to the farmers, again, that will contribute for us to have food available, and we would not have a problem with food insecurity. And another thing that contributes again to food insecurity is the distribution of it. It might be available in one parish, and it might be available in another parish. So again, this causes a problem for food insecurity. And then foreign culture causes a problem with food insecurity. That most time the people want to get the thing ready, they want the foreign stuff, and they're not supporting the local. So again, we have a problem with food insecurity. So there is a lot of aspects that could fall into place that cause food insecurity, and we can turn it around that within 6 months to a year, I think food insecurity could come to food security, food affordability, because we could look at the different grades of food, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. We know the grade 1 are the most expensive ones, the grade 2, the medium class people, the grade 3, we have our vulnerable people. So we can have it to distribute island-wide, region-wide. So I could say that these are some of the challenges that face food insecurity in the region, especially in Grenada.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Marryshow, for that very on-the-ground grassroots farmer perspective. And of course, later on, I would circle back to Minister Caesar as a policymaker, because there are some initiatives on the way to address some of these issues, and I'm sure he will want to weigh in on that. Certainly the issue of technology arises as we talk about, as he said it and you've also said it, the fact that even on small islands, you have a mismatch where some parts of the island are food secure and others are insecure, essentially not being able to connect the producers with the consumers. And that is clearly something that with use of technology, we probably can help address. But we'll come back to that later on as we look at solutions and the way forward. So thank you for that. Let me turn to Mr. Atherton, Danny, as we call him at ECCB. And Danny, how is the pandemic affecting local farming? And what is the state of food security in our region? So from your perspective, what are you seeing? How is the pandemic affecting farming?
Yeah. Yes, Governor, as it relates to the pandemic has some negative effects in terms of inputs, as both persons before me have spoken. You see, as part of the supply chain, we get a lot of our fertilizer, inputs, seeds, irrigation equipment for the more, technologically advanced agriculture, nutrients for hydroponic systems from outside our borders, because we do not do those locally. So that's adversely affected with the pandemic, because it means it takes a longer period of time. So you need to have had a certain amount of that stored on your property in order to have had continuity. In terms of the most severe impact that we felt as farmers was with respect to farm income. And the farm income, because it was affected, one, because of farm market constriction. The farm market got smaller. For example, let's think of an individual who was accustomed to selling to supermarkets, the hotels, restaurants, the higglers, and any other person, school feeding programs. With many of those hotels closed, schools closed, and all that sort of thing, you would have a significant constriction in the market side, because the market is the people whom you're selling to. So farm income would have been affected adversely in that. And then the other aspect is cash flow, of course. Your income, your cash flow directly relates to things that you can do, because some of those persons, they're going to make a determination that, listen, I'm going to pay you later. But that is very important to you, because they're going to eat your food when they get it. So if they eat the food when they get it, and like some hotels do, they pay you in 6 weeks, the farmer ends up with a very, nasty end of a stick. So one has to be very cautious, when you think about that. So that's what the pandemic does to us. The other thing that the pandemic does is that it can have an immediate negative psychological effect on people, and cause a significant drop-off in production due to that disappointments. But I quickly need to speak to, there's some positives that the pandemic, did bring about. It created opportunity, and I think Ms. Marryshow pointed out that the germplasm, which is basically the plant and the material that we have that are Creole or local indigenous material that tend to be more resistant to diseases that are in our borders. We need to plant a lot of that. We have seen the backhoeing of a lot of our lands and using improved, hybrid technologies from outside. But a lot of our local varieties, which are hardier, we need to make sure that we have a good base of that, because one of the opportunities that this pandemic did is that I found a lot of persons going back to look for hardy varieties of cassava, hardy varieties of, bananas, hardy varieties of sweet potato, because you could no longer look at, those that do not have long storage life or that sort of thing. It also created an opportunity for more integrated pest management and the use of cultural practices, because a lot of things we had a quick solution. Something affects us, we go into the place and we buy some chemicals and we spray a pyrethroid onto the plant and we kill the insects and so forth that are bothering us. But when you have a shortage, you kind of get it out of Trinidad, ICI chemicals or someplace, you tend to have a serious problem there. You need to go back to cultural practices, the burning, the smoking, the neem, this and that sort of thing. Another, what it also does, it gives a focus on the real farm-to-table approach. It really brought into sharp focus in the minds of policymakers what that really means, the farm-to-table approach, how because it cannot be farm to table when there are so many things away from the table. And it also brought into sharp focus and opportunity for all people, the farmers, to be more resilient in their production system. So for example, use more organic systems, develop compost piles instead of burn, allow things to rot because they retain more moisture, because you are going to be in a position where you're not going to be able to afford to pay for water, maybe, but if you have mulch can significantly reduce the amount of money you have to pay for water. And also, what it does, it enables persons to see the need to have that marriage between climate responsive technologies, because not only we were having the pandemic, but we were also having abnormally high temperatures. And this is a very significant thing, and very little rainfall until the first week of July. So there were several, what do they call them, geographical factors that also they brought into sharp focus the opportunities for us to reverse engineer based on that adverse condition, so we can have new opportunities. And it also created an opportunity for cooperative ventures because it spreads the risk. That was one of the biggest things that one found. It created a new opportunity for cooperative enterprises in terms of procurement of inputs and that sort of thing, Governor. I don't want.
Right. Thank you, Danny. I know you're very passionate about the farming. And so as you spoke, Minister Caesar, Ms. Marryshow, and now you, Ms. Atherton, already our listeners and viewers will be seeing a number of issues being thrown up as we sort of peel the onion, as it were, pun intended, on this issue of food security. So there's the issue of food itself and access to food, quality food. There's the issue of health. You just touched on, for example, the need for organic food. One of the lessons of this pandemic is the need for us as a region to invest more in primary health care, because we've seen comorbidities. We've seen the higher risk for persons who have non-communicable diseases such as hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, and so on. And the need for us to eat healthy foods, which of course is often local foods, because I'm clear local foods are healthier than a lot of the foreign foods that we import and that we buy. Of course, sometimes they're cheaper, which is why Ms. Marryshow was saying this foreign taste issue has to be addressed. But you also touched on the issue of climate. And this is very important because, again, one of the things, the lessons of this pandemic is the need for us as a region to really push forward with respect to our fight against climate change. We're hearing that as a result of the climate crisis, we can in fact see more pandemics going forward, which is a scary thought. And of course, that has implications for our food, for our health, and for our quality of life as a region. So this is a very, very, as we said, multifaceted issue with a lot of policy things on the table, which we have to address, but we must address as we move forward as a region and build resilience. So in a short moment, I'm going to ask the panel to talk about how we see the future in terms of bringing some of these things together as a region. But I want to go back to Ms. Marryshow and ask you a little bit about your vision for food security. So from where you sit as a farmer, and of course a retired agriculture officer, but as a farmer, Ms. Marryshow, what's your vision for food security in our region? On mute, please.
Governor, you can hear me now?
Yes, we're hearing you. Go right ahead.
Yes, I would like to see the vision that I would like to see for agriculture is an established agricultural-based economy where there can be good, healthy food, nutritious food for normal times and times when there are disasters, anytime that disasters are on us. So I would really love to see that vision implemented within Grenada and also within the region, because once we have a vision and agricultural economy, I know that we're able to get all the other agricultural aspects into full, like good agricultural practices. Well, they say climate smart agriculture, but we that grew up before, we know it's traditional agriculture as our grandparents used to farm. See a good training for the farmers, putting them on this planting schedule basis and they will able to, this is the vision that I would really like to see for agriculture. Also getting our youths involved.
Right, thank you for that. Minister Caesar, could I ask you to come back on this one? I mean, a vision is what could be and should be. And from where you sit, what's your vision? What would you like to see?
It was very interesting, Governor, that you pointed out in one of the introductions to the questions being posed to one of the panelists, that we have a significant food import bill of over 1 billion Eastern Caribbean.
1.6 billion last year. 1.6 billion last year.
1.6 billion Eastern Caribbean dollars.
Yes.
As a policymaker, definitely, I would want us to carve out a percentage of that 1.6 million EC dollars so that we can create greater stimulation in our local economy. It is doable. Of course, we are going to have all the factors of production in our member states, and different member states are blessed with different quantities and variables as it pertains to factors of production. We have to study the subject matter. We have to continue to analyze and assess it. And we have to organize our labor, our capital, and our land to address the issue of having more food produced locally. Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, we have been doing excellent work as it pertains to our quest to expand the agriculture sector. Of course, we have a population whereby the labor force, there's a competition in the labor force as to whether persons will go into the service sector or persons will go into agriculture. What we are seeing of late, however, is that when you invest in technology, it reduces the level of persons who want to go into the services sector when you increase the technology in agriculture. So when you have greenhouse parks, young persons who hitherto would say, I don't want to do the traditional type of farming, they will be first to come to work at a greenhouse park. So here is where we see an injection in technology will definitely cause a revolution in terms of the number of persons within our labor force who will be willing to go into agriculture. The second issue is that we cannot divorce ourselves from the critical importance of the OECS as a sub-region and the economic unity that we have to always seek to benefit from. We cannot address the issue of food security, food availability and accessibility and affordability, and to carve out a greater market share of that $1.6 billion by us doing it individually. Remember, if Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, if we want spices, we can import all the spices we need from Grenada. I'm telling you, the quality of the spices coming out of Grenada, some of the best spices in the world. We have to ensure that as policymakers, we continue to create the enabling environment to match buyers and sellers, consumers and producers.
Yeah.
And I want to note that Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, we have a platform for the production of livestock. And we have an excellent relationship where a man from Grenville by the name of Jew Jack would get on a boat, come to Saint Vincent with turmeric, nutmegs, and allspice, bay leaf. And what he takes down cattle, he takes down pigs, he takes down sheep and goats. And he does that 5 times per year. So much so he's one of the most popular buyers in Saint Vincent and the Grenadines. And there are persons in Saint Vincent and the Grenadines who have now established a relationship with persons in Grenada. So as we look at advancing the agriculture sector, and as a policymaker, as I look towards 2025 and to 2030, I don't want us to be pessimistic and think that the exponential increase in the food import bill is because people do not want to farm. I want to put it squarely at the fact that we do not have enough relationships within the sub-region between buyers and sellers. And if we can create a platform, which we are working on through the OECS Secretariat, whereby buyers and sellers can have a meeting place, we are going to be able to increase trade in different commodities, and that is going to significantly close the door on many of the commodities that we import from outside of the sub-region. Some of the best pineapples I've ever had in my life were produced right here in the sub-region. You speak about the issue of tomatoes, pumpkins, watermelons, we all have it in the sub-region, and the issue of maritime transportation that is affordable and is regular is another issue that we definitely have to address. But in a nutshell, as a policymaker, I am going straight to the issue of the 1.6 billion Eastern Caribbean dollars, which if we have circulating in our rural communities, will fill that gap that once was occupied by banana production from a monocropping standpoint. What we're going to have is a more diversified production platform. We'll be producing many different commodities, and we will be trading increasingly within the sub-region.
Right. Minister, well, I'm signing up for that, because from this point of view of the central bank, clearly, we have an interest in this matter. $1 saved, every dollar foreign exchange saved is a dollar earned, as the old adage goes. And to the extent that we can actually find ways to reduce that food import bill, we want to support that. In other words, we will support investments there because we see the savings that will accrue. Not just in saving foreign exchange, but of course, as you pointed out, the creation of jobs and the stimulation of not just the local economy, but particularly the rural economy. And that is something that we're very keen to see, because that then has benefits, wider societal benefits, as we go forward. I want to stay with you briefly, Minister, before we get ready for a second segment. And that is, I read with great interest an initiative that you started as a result of this pandemic with a very interesting name. It's called Love Box. The Love Box. What is that about? Tell us a little bit more about this special initiative that you started during the pandemic.
Thank you very much again, my brother. What took place in the very early days of the pandemic was a lot of persons were scared because of the issue that if you get in contact with someone who has COVID-19, that there could be a transmission. So importantly, the health advisories and protocols clearly stated that persons must practice social distancing. And you know, in the first few days, few weeks, there are a lot of persons who are staying inside. And we recognize in Saint Vincent and the Grenadines that the access to food was going to be an issue. So food was available. it's affordable, but for persons to actually leave their homes to go and get it, the persons were panicking. At the same time, when several airports were closed around the region, and we did not have a regular stream of flights, it had a significant impact on hotel occupancy. So that was reduced to a number approaching zero. And a lot of the commodities which were consumed by our guests in the hotels and the guest houses and the bed and breakfast, they were now staying within the precincts of the farm because that supply chain going to the hotels was basically cut off. So farmers were complaining that they now have an oversupply and they do not have markets for their produce. At the same time, we were following the science carefully, and persons were very, very frontal on the issue that if you boost your immune system, you stand a better chance of surviving the pandemic. Remember that stage, very early days.
Yes.
And we spoke to several doctors, locally, regionally, and internationally, and we came up with several commodities, things like turmeric and ginger, those two especially, that we decided we had to come up with an opportunity to provide access to the population. The Prime Minister of Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, very proactive, very early to address the issue of the pandemic, took a bill to Parliament, and within that bill, it made provisions for a 12 million EC stimulus package for agriculture. And in that stimulus package, the Honourable Prime Minister and the Honourable Minister of Finance, working with the Ministry of Agriculture and the technicians, carved out a particular framework to make food accessible and to make food available. And we decided that we wanted to lift the spirits of persons, and we called it the Love Box. Because remember in that dreary period, no one was speaking about love, people were speaking about fear. And we wanted to ensure that we lift the spirits and to present persons with a gift, and vulnerable persons. So we were building on a platform where we have a quest in Saint Vincent and the Grenadines to reduce hunger and undernourishment to a number approaching zero. We have a Zero Hunger Trust Fund. We have a Zero Hunger Initiative. And we worked through the Ministry of National Mobilization. We spoke to all the churches, the different persons who are in the communities and organizations forming cooperatives. So we had a buy-in from civil society, NGOs, and community-based organizations. We had a list of the persons in each community, persons who are vulnerable. And within 1 week, we were able to operationalize 5 buy-in depots in the country to buy all that excess food that before the pandemic would have been sold to the hotels and the guest houses, to buy that excess food, which would have gone to Trinidad and Tobago. Because when Trinidad and Tobago decided to take the extreme measure of closing its borders, and also a lot of the restaurants in Trinidad and Tobago were closed, then it reduced the demand for a lot of the food that came from Saint Vincent and the Grenadines. So we hired persons, so we stimulated by creating that level of employment that was needed, because a lot of persons who were sailors, a lot of persons who were working at these hotels who were out of a job, they were looking for a job, so we employed persons at the different stations. We purchased the food, so we had increased employment for truckers. You had increased employment for persons who are doing all the grading. And we had the distribution process, the company that is making the boxes. I've never produced as many boxes in a long time. And we have created an internal distribution system whereby persons can stay at home and get a box of about 60 pounds of food valued at between 60 to 120 Eastern Caribbean dollars delivered at their doorstep, and can provide food for approximately a week with all the vegetables, all the eggs. We had a nutritionist assess the products that will go into the box, and later on next week, we are going to launch a special love box for persons who are suffering from diabetes, because we have a lot of the yams and the dasheen and the edos, a lot of the starchy goods in the boxes, but we want to cater specially now, not just for the population in general, but for persons who are affected by diabetes. And I am really happy to see that the FAO has recognized this. And even in Argentina, you hear people speaking about caja de amor, the box of love. It is traversing the entire hemisphere. And it is something that I have seen and witnessed last week, where persons in the private sector are now preparing love boxes for export. And we are going to have a shipment, a sample shipment, go off to the British Virgin Islands, where we are going to put on supermarket shelves love box, the love box as a brand, where someone can go into the supermarket, instead of picking up all these different things, you have a box with a mix and match, and no two boxes are the same. The boxes are all different. And it is something that I admire. I know that there's also a similar model in Dominica. There's a similar model in Trinidad and Tobago. And different member states would have different frameworks of having food available. What we did to ensure that we maintain production is that of that $12 million, we placed monies to assist by grant farmers with seeds and seedlings. We distributed animals to ensure that even when we export, we increase the export of animals during this period, that we have a replenishing of the national herd. And we also will be, in approximately a week, having 5,000 farmers receiving 500 EC dollars to ensure that the bills are taken care of. Because the farmers you have an average. I visited one of the buying depots, and a farmer spoke to me. He's receiving approximately $1,000 per week by selling food to the Love Box Initiative. So you have that internal circulation of capital, which definitely that farmer now can go and purchase fertilizer. And recently, we had a shipment of fertilizer coming to the country. Before the pandemic, that same shipment of fertilizer will take 8 weeks to be sold. Because of the increase in the movement of goods through the Love Box program and the demand for export to the sub-region, that lasted less than 48 hours. Wow. So we are seeing where a lot of persons who were working in the services sector, because they're from rural areas, they are now heading back to agriculture. Similarly, you will have some persons who are from Grenville in Grenada who are working in St. George's. All they knew growing up was agriculture, but they have a security job in St. George's. And because of the pandemic, the hotel may be closed or have low occupancy and they're laid off. They can easily fit in to the agriculture sector, and we're seeing them purchasing their implements, receiving assistance from the $12 million stimulus package, and they are increasing production and productivity. So we can project that in 2021, because of the repositioning of capital and labor to focus on agriculture, that took place as a resultant implication of the COVID-19 pandemic, that we are going to have an increase in production in 2021. And that can put us in an excellent position to carve out a greater portion of that $1.6 billion. I'm keeping my eye on it.
Yes,
and $1.6 billion that you spoke about. And I also want to say that the ministers of agriculture throughout the OECS, we have a similar and a common goal. And I really want to encourage the stakeholders, and importantly in the stakeholders network are the consumers, because when the consumer goes to the supermarket, he has to make a choice. And I want that choice to be to buy local. And local means that, local for St. Vincent means that it can be produced in Grenville and sold in Georgetown, St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Right. Thank you very much for that. And I really appreciated that live example of innovation in the pandemic, which further advances food security, not just in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but potentially, as you said, regional wide. So thanks for that. So panelists, thank you so far, so good. For those who are listening and viewing, you're listening to ECCB Digital Dialogues, and our focus tonight is pandemic and food security. I'm going to save my final question for later, and now I'd like us to move to the second segment of our dialogue. In this segment, we do an audience poll. So we present you with 4 questions, and we use those questions to also get your responses. And very often we find them useful. Even for us at the Central Bank doing research, we like to take a pulse, as it were, from some of these responses as we think about the policy issues that we're giving advice on or that we're working on. And I certainly want to put the minister on notice that working with him and his colleagues, I don't know if it is too aspirational to ask for a 25% reduction in that food import bill over the next 3 years. I don't know if that is too ambitious, but I certainly would like us to agree on a target as a region and push for that and monitor that and be able to report results, positive results on that basis. So we're going to be watching that, but I think we have to have a certain concerted approach to ensuring that we could, as you said, bring that food bill down. Right, so let's move to the second segment, our poll. And again, I'd like to recognize the radio stations that are partnering with us tonight for this broadcast. In Anguilla, we have Radio Anguilla, Class FM, and Cool FM Radio. In Antigua and Barbuda, ABS Radio and Nice FM Radio. In Commonwealth of Dominica, DBS Radio, Vibes Radio, and Kyrie FM. In Grenada, there is GBN Classic 105, Sisters Radio on Karakou, and We FM. In St. Christopher and Nevis, we have Freedom FM and ZIZ Television. In St. Lucia, there is WVEN 93.5, 94.7 FM, and Rhythm FM. And in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Praise FM, NBC Radio, and Star Radio. And just to indicate that there will be rebroadcasts of this program in Montserrat on Radio ZJB on Sunday, the 13th of September at 12 noon. And in Saint Kitts and Nevis, we will have rebroadcasts of this on Win FM 98.9 at 1:30 p.m. tomorrow, Friday, September 11, and on Vaughan Radio, 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, Friday, September 11th, which is tomorrow. So thank you all of our partner stations that are carrying this dialogue live and will also rebroadcast. We are grateful for this partnership on this very important topic. So we have 3 poll questions. Now to our poll. And for those of you who are not used to this, we are going to give you, you have to go to www.mentimeter.com. And once you go to www.mentimeter.com, you're going to get a code. And the code tonight is 1757479. So you put into your browser, whether it's on your iPad, your smartphone, or your desktop, www.mentimeter.com, www.menti.com. So let me take that again for those who are listening, www.menti.com. Once you insert that, you will be asked for a code, and the code tonight is 1757479. You put in that code and the questions will begin to appear. Question number 1. When it comes to buying and eating local food, what is your biggest concern? When it comes to buying and eating local food, what is your biggest concern? Quality of local food, price of local food, taste of local food, or availability of local food? When it comes to buying and eating local food, what is your biggest concern? Quality of food, price of food, taste of food, or availability of food? And I see we've begun to receive responses. And those of you who are viewing, you will see it on your screen. Those of you who are listening, I will tell you in a moment what's happening. But people have begun to weigh in with their views. So you have 4 options on this question, because we do want to grow what we eat and eat what we grow. And we want to better understand what your constraints are. And so this first question addresses or attempts to investigate that constraint. When it comes to buying and eating local food, what is your biggest concern? Quality of food? Is it price of food, taste of food, or availability of food? And just for those who are joining, and again, how do you join? You go to www.menti.com. That's the access. And then the code tonight is 1757479. Once you put in the code, you will be able to see the questions. And you can do that, as I said, from your smartphone, from your iPad or tablet, or you can do that as well from your desktop. And so even people who are on listening by radio, for whatever reason, you're not watching on television, if you have a device, you can also participate in this poll. So 30 seconds left before we move to the next question. We have 3 questions tonight. When it comes to buying and eating local food, what is your biggest concern? Is it quality? Is it price? Is it taste? Or is it availability? Final 10 seconds. Well, the poll has closed on this question, and the overwhelming majority of persons have said, who have cast their vote, that price is the issue. So 7 people said quality, 26 people said local food, the price. There were no issues with taste. That means local tastes best. All right, that's what I read from that. And there were 5 persons who said availability. But by far the biggest issue or concern raised is the price of local food. And I can't say we're surprised. I'm certainly not surprised by that. But when we come back to the panel, we have to talk a bit about how can we address this issue of price. I suppose part of it is volumes. The more people buy and the volumes increase, then supposedly the price would come down. But that's a challenge that we have in our region, where very often foreign is cheaper, and therefore people opt for foreign. And we have to address that in our food security strategy. Okay, so thanks for that. Let's go to our second question, please. And our second question tonight is this: what is the most important component that you would like to see incorporated in the regional food security policies? What is the most important component that you would like to see incorporated in the region's food security policies. And here are your options: better integration with health policy, climate change adaptation and mitigation measures, greater adoption of digital technologies, greater regional cooperation, including specialization and logistics. That includes transport, how we get food to and fro. And finally, advanced agricultural research and training. So what is the most important component that you would like to see incorporated into our region food security policy? And clearly, all 5 components are important, but the question is, what in your estimation is most important? We want to get a feel for that. So again, for those of you who are listening, the question is, what is the most important component that you would like to see incorporated into the region's food security policies? Is it better integration with health policy? Is it climate change adaptation and mitigation? Greater adoption of digital technologies? Greater regional cooperation in respect of logistics? And advanced agricultural research and training? So that's our second question. And we give you another 20 seconds on this one. Let's see your responses. So what we're seeing is that for the persons who've chosen to participate, the majority is for the issue of regional coordination, including specialization and logistics. So Minister Caesar, there is clearly a call being made here for our Ministers of Agriculture, working with the OECS Commission and of course the private sector, to be able to get food moved around the region. The question of availability, obviously here, accessibility rather, arises. Getting food moved around. So those who have surplus can get to deficit countries and make sure that not only are we reducing the food import bill in the OECS, but also we're doing it in the wider CARICOM area. Final 10 seconds for this question, final 10 seconds. What is the most important component that you would like to see incorporated into the region's food security policies? And so there we have it. The final poll results. And this is election in real time, results in real time. There are a lot of elections around our region as we speak. You don't have to wait for the results. We call them as we go, and you can see them on screen. And so you will see that 16 persons said health policy, but 32 persons actually said regional cooperation in respect of specialization and logistics. 4 people said climate change, 12 people said research and training. Interestingly enough, 0 persons opted or voted for digital technologies. So that's an interesting feedback there. But the overwhelming majority are calling for greater cooperation in respect of specialization and logistics to be able to address the issue of food security in our region. So thank you for that. Let's go to our third and final question in our poll tonight. So here's the question. Which of these measures will provide the biggest boost to food security in our region? Which of these measures will provide the biggest boost to food security in our region? Here are the options. 1, crop insurance. 2, fast and reliable shipping. 3, protection from predial larceny. And 4, more incentives to farmers. So the question is, which of these measures will provide the biggest boost to food security in our region? 1, crop insurance. 2, fast and reliable shipping. 3, protection from predial larceny. And 4, more incentives to our farmers. What say you? Final question. We'll give you another 30 seconds for those who want to weigh in. And we'd like to see more people participate in the poll. I'm not sure if it's a technology issue where people are not able to move from one to the next, but you should still be able to watch and put in your browser to get the questions. So I'm not sure why more people are not participating on this one. But anyhow, final 10 seconds, and then we will close the poll. Right, so poll closed. The poll is closed, and the results are 4 people said crop insurance, 19 people said fast and reliable shipping, 6 said protection from predial larceny, 33 said more incentives to farmers. And I would want to hear from later on, hopefully before we wrap, from both all panelists, but especially Ms. Marryshow, Mr. Arthurton, who are farmers, and the minister on this issue of incentives, because as somebody who's worked in government for a long time, there are incentives. I'm not sure if we have the right incentive, but I know that there are incentives in many of our countries. There are incentives in terms of duty-free vehicles, or if not 100%, 50%. Duty-free imports, fuel, reduction in terms of fuel, the charge, taxes on fuel for fisher folk and for some farmers, planting material. So I'm not sure whether or not the policymakers have got the incentive mix right, because I know there are incentives, but what I'm hearing is more incentives. So we need to sort of understand better what exactly is on offer that's perhaps not working, or what needs to be, how we need to calibrate the incentive package to address this issue with farmers. And we also know the very important issue of fast and reliable shipping. And that, of course, is a big issue. Those of us, for example, in the Leeward Islands, in the OECS, do rely in part on the Windward Islands for food, for some of our food. And shipping is a big issue. So we can tell you in Saint Kitts, Saint Kitts does have local and Nevis local production, but that is supplemented by regional importation from islands such as Dominica and Saint Vincent and Grenadines. And we know what day the boat is going to arrive, and we go down to the market or to the boat at a certain time to be able to get certain produce, because of course we want to eat local, and some of us have grown up eating local food, and we want to continue to eat local food. But it's not cheap, and that was borne out in the first question. And so for some of us, it's also a question of price. We want to eat local, which is better quality, which is safer, which is more nutritious, which is more healthy, but we are also dealing with higher prices as well. And that's a challenge. So the polls are closed. I want to thank all of you who participated. And let us now move to our third and final segment. And we have a few questions, so we're going to go straight into those questions for our panel. After these questions, I will ask the panel for their final thoughts in terms of the way forward for food security in our region. So question number 1, can buying locally produced food or food from other OECS countries protect our foreign reserves so that these reserves will be available to buy fuel and other products not produced in the region? Please explain to the public how crucial the local production of food is to the foreign reserves. Well, I think we've covered this. $1.6 billion we're spending every year in foreign reserves to buy food. $1.6 billion. That is about 600 million US dollars. So clearly, to the extent that we can actually produce more of our food, consume more of our food, we will be saving foreign exchange. And as I said, a dollar saved is a dollar earned. So for us, it's very, very important. And that is partly why the central bank is having this conversation, why we've arranged this. But of course, it is not just foreign reserves. As I said, it is also about the health of our region, the economy of our region, our jobs, as we deal with this pandemic. But clearly, it's a big issue in terms of foreign exchange generated and foreign exchange saved. And of course, if we export food, so it's not just saving on importation of food, but if we export food, like Minister Caesar said, to Trinidad or to other parts of the region, BVI and so on, we actually earn foreign exchange as well. Because many of these payments, some of these payments are also made in hard currency, US dollars, some of them. So that benefits us as well when we export within the region and of course outside of the region. So those countries that export, for example, tuna to the eastern seaboard of the US, that is foreign exchange. Those countries like Saint Vincent, the Grenadines and Grenada and others that export fish to the European Union, that is also bringing in foreign exchange. So, you know, it works. Second question from Facebook. How is the pandemic going to affect our markets? Well, I think we covered that earlier. I think the panelists picked up that question. Both the Minister of Agriculture, Minister Caesar, as well as Mr. Atherton, I think spoke to the question of how markets were constricted or impacted by the pandemic. Very interesting question, and I know Ms. Marryshow raised that one. How do we get the young people more interested in agriculture? Minister, what's your take on that? How do we get our young more interested in agriculture?
Well, first of all, I want to posit that it's a fallacy that young people don't want to get into agriculture. As I noted earlier, that you don't see young persons going to the car dealers and buying a Nissan Sentra that was from 1985. Persons want to keep current, and persons want to ensure that they are on the cutting edge, and it's part of the evolution of life. Young persons are interested in agriculture once the requisite technologies are available. So you have persons who went to primary school, they went to secondary school, they went on to the community college, technical college, and they have studied agriculture throughout their years. They're not going to be readily available to pick up a hoe and a cutlass in the very traditional sense. But if you have tillers, rototillers available, it's not that young persons are scared or fearful of physical work. We want to do the physical work, but we want to ensure that when we do it, our productivity increases because we have the economies of scope when we utilize our labor as a factor of production. So you have young persons, I am aware, and in Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, we have a unique opportunity where we are building a modern medicinal industry. And you have a long list of young persons who are employed in this modern medicinal industry. Why? Because the capital injection into this industry, a significant percentage of it goes towards an investment in cutting edge technology and not in production in the traditional sense. And it is really good if we can invest in the technology, have the young persons be a part of the production and productivity in the countries, because it is in natural progression that we will be able to carve out more of the food import bill by producing more goods locally. So I am putting it squarely that we are seeing there are more young persons in Saint Vincent and the Grenadines in 2020 who are staying longer in school and attaining more academic qualification than any period before, because we have universal access to secondary education, and we are basically producing a large number of persons in agriculture, in the agriculture sector, with university degrees. These persons want to be able to use their cell phones to turn on the irrigation at the greenhouses. And that technology is available. There are persons who want to raise chickens, but they do not want to do it the traditional way. And I want to end as I started. When I was a little boy, age 5 in 1985, when the rain was coming and I was getting a little ride in my aunt's car, I had to do the wind up window. Now is a power window, period. And we have to get with the technology. And I'm happy that many of the governments and many of the investors in the private sector, that they are looking towards how we can have greater investments directed and targeted at the technology, so that the cell phones become a critical part of production, the computer, the laptop becomes a critical part of production. Instead of having extension officers walking around with a pen and a book, you can have a drone from a strategic standpoint, a strategic place, and you can map 150 acres of land instead of having an extension officer trying to traverse that in 3 or 4 months and still not being able to capture the information digitally. So the information is taking more time to capture and it is far less accurate. Thank you.
Right. Excellent. Thanks for that. Let me just ask Ms. Marryshow, do you have a view on how we can get young people into farming? Make sure you're on mute. Go ahead and unmute your mic, yes. And then Danny, I'll ask you as well. This is really important, the future of the industry. Our minister spoke to it, but I'd like to hear your views as well. Ms. Marryshow, go ahead.
Yeah, I think most times we as adults underestimate young people. And I can tell you that young people have a very keen interest in farming. We have a group of young people that we work with now. And when I say we, it's the Grenada Network of Rural Women Producers, known as GrenRUP. We are the Grenada chapter of the Caribbean Network. And we have a program that we call Crop Connect. And Crop Connect is linking agriculture to tourism. And we have these young people growing the crops, we purchase it and we get it to the hotels and the restaurant. And this is started about 3 years ago with the Sanders Hotel. Then Silver Sands came on stream, they heard about us. And the Arthurton came on stream, and Calabash came, and all the others just pouring in. And the people that supplying us with the most vegetables and root crop are the young farmers. What young farmers want is motivation, that they can see people coming on their farm, talking with them, assisting them with what they're doing, giving them some technical advice, giving them some support, some incentive. As we talk about incentive, sometimes, yes, there is incentive, but is the incentive appropriate? If you have an incentive with concession and you get 100%, yes, for the vehicle, it might be about $80,000 or $90,000. The incentive might take out at $20,000. The real cost of the vehicle now you have to put out about $60,000 or $70,000. The farmers don't have that. The young people don't have that. Is there a reasonable loan available where the farmers could go into the bank and get an interest loan between 2 to 5% interest, and the vehicle could stand security? So although they're getting the concession, they cannot afford to buy the vehicle. Inputs are very expensive. Is the concession that the agricultural shops trigger down to the farmers? I don't think so. Inputs still are very expensive. Hence the reason local food is very expensive. And I think once young people, a reasonable package is put together for young people will more young people will get into agriculture, they will stay in it, and they will see that they can feed their farm family, because there is money to make in farming once you do it the proper and the right way.
Right, so the money to be made in farming, it's a business. Agribusiness is an opportunity. And what I'm hearing you say is that in this pandemic, more young people should consider agriculture very seriously. And I fully encourage and support that call. Danny, what say you?
Governor, it's important for us to understand that significant backing ratio that the central bank has was occasioned by sugar and cotton from Nevis and food produce from the people in Grenada to Canada and those markets. So that brought in the foreign exchange that now give us the backing ratio. So one has to understand that the geese boat, there is a formula, a workable formula. And that workable formula, a significant part of that was youth. In Saint Kitts, in the sugar industry, they had young children gang, but they were not gang fighting. They were sugarcane cutting guys that the guys were not interested in going to school, but they made a lot of money from, planting 20, 30 acres. The same thing happened in Roseville Valley in St. Lucia, where there was the model farms. Fellas were doing $33,000 at the end of, every 3 months in terms of banana production. So I think that, one has to understand that, we've been there. We have done that. The question is, why have we deferred from that? And why, therefore, has there been that significant attrition in terms of the youth into that? And I am humbly submitting that it is not only, it's incentives, yes, but it is speaking the action. It is acting the speak. It is persons leading by example. For example, a lot of us who went to farm school in Guyana School of Agriculture, ECCB, and those places are the ones who are farming right now. I noticed from this panel, both Marryshow and myself went to the Guyana School of Agriculture 10 years apart. And that's what we did. When we went to farm school, we understood when Forbes Burnham said produce or perish, what he meant. Land to the tiller, those were national policies. We understand that during the Grenada, whatever, you had situations where there was a motivation of youths to understand food security. We are friends of Taiwan, and we understand the importance of food, even though Taiwan, a significant part of their diet is rice, and they do not let people from outside sell them all the rice. Even though it is very expensive to do, they grow a lot of the rice locally. What we're saying is that a lot of these things have to do with understanding the underlying culture, where we have come from, where we are going, and make agriculture a bedrock. It is like, it is an inalienable right that people continue to do agriculture as a main plank of our development. This movement away to tourism as a monocrop, replacing a monocrop and so forth, it is, in my view, not the best thing. And I even have a suggestion as to how that we can use that by using something that Mauritius use, Israel use, and several other countries, small island states use. It's called the Pioneer Program, the Pioneer Farming Program, where they actually give concessions to persons as long as they remain consistent in their production and so forth. They give them all of the benefits, and they ensure, just like they have in incubator systems, that the government offers special contracts. 25% of the government contracts go to them. It means that farmers, young people will know that the school feeding programs, 50% of it go to youth production. Let me tell you something, you will have youth cooperatives shooting up in all of the other countries because that's sure money. The school feeding program, the hospital program, those are monies that are coming straight from government to the people. That's a circular within the economy. You're getting me excited, so I'm going to stop.
Yes. Very good, very good. No, the passion is evident, and we certainly agree. I think we all agree, all panelists, that we want to see it as a bedrock. We want to see a smart approach to how we do it, the business, I think that's the point Minister made with the technology, and you also have said, how we can deploy the appropriate technology to make sure it's a business. I use the example when speaking of technology all the time about the, the fisherman who is fishing and who can use his smartphone to upload his catch and to sell it, so that by the time he lands ashore, he's already basically sold his fish and the money is in his account. And technology allows us to do that, and so there are ways and means for us to do better business. And that is one of the things we have to be able to show our young people, that there's money to be made, and that you can be cool, meaning you can use your cool technologies to actually be able to do it. And of course, in so doing also benefit not just your families, but your country and your region. So we want to continue to encourage that. There was a question raised now about the question of shipping, and perhaps I could ask the minister to come back in on this. What is the role of regional sea transport in fostering trade in food among the islands? Minister Caesar, could you comment on the issue of shipping?
The movement of the commodities that we produce from the farm gate to the marketplace is of first importance. And it's not only maritime transport, but we also export by air as well. And we export by air a lot extra-regionally. We are building a network within the sub-region and the region on the indigenous maritime transport investors that we have. So there are some families in Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, in Grenada, in St. Lucia, in all the member states, who for many years have always been seafarers. However, we are not seeing the evolution of these vessels to address in a very apt way the issue of having the cold storage transportation, which then and in turn limits the capacity of some member states to move perishable goods from one member state to the next. And because of that, if you look at that $1.6 billion food import bill, a lot of the goods that we import will fall within the category of perishables. It's easy to put a box of yam or dasheen or eddos on a boat without the cold storage, and it gets to the British Virgin Islands in a good state. But when you're dealing, for example, you dare not venture into poultry, you dare not venture into beef. In fact, when we export livestock from Saint Vincent and Grenadines, we send it live, because the vessels do not have the capacity as yet. They have not explored the capacity as yet, that if we slaughter it in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that the meat can be shipped to other member states. I think that this is one of the areas, the growth areas for investment, that the private sector would definitely need some capital injection. And it's one of the areas that we've been canvassing and speaking about for many years. I know that it will take some retrofitting of some of the vessels, but I am already seeing where several international liners are now moving goods within member states of the sub-region, even though it is taking a longer period because it's a more circuitous route. But it is getting there in excellent quality, and it is creating an opportunity and an avenue. But all in all, we do not want our indigenous seafarers to lose out on that opportunity to move the goods that we are going to produce within the member states, because it's an excellent opportunity for us to keep, again, a lot of the foreign exchange within our economies.
Right, thank you. Thank you for that, Minister. Right, so let's go to another question. We have 20 minutes before we wrap this program. And if you're just joining us, you are listening to ECCB Digital Dialogues. Our focus tonight is pandemic and food security. The United Nations in New York has planted a roof garden. Does the ECCB have a similar project going? If not, can one be implemented to lend or leverage your clarion call for food? So we do not have a food project at the ECCB. I don't know if I now need to investigate whether and to what extent we can find space on our campus for food production plots. But I think more importantly, as central bank, we want to encourage our policymakers as we look at a program of action over the next 3 years for recovery, resilience, and ultimate transformation of our region. We want to look frontally at how we could boost food security. What investments are required, what policy support may be required. And, as a central bank, that's our role. So not so much in food production. I think some of us are doing our little backyard gardening. I know members of staff who are actively involved in that. We have members of staff from the Windwards, for example, who have sweet potato and yams and watermelons behind their house. Some of them are able to sell, some of them are able to donate to colleagues and friends and family. So I think we want to see more of that in terms of our personal responsibility. But as a regional institution, our role is to really encourage, advocate, support policies that will boost food security. So that's where we stand on that. The next question is, can the governor call for a renewed emphasis, increase and interest and increase in numbers on CSEC agriculture in schools and the revitalization of school gardens? Well, I certainly am making a big call tonight for food security, for a bigger role for agribusiness in our economies, and certainly in terms of building commitment and loyalty to the sector, what we do in our schools are important. So yes, I'd like to see us ensure that the CSEC programs on food and agriculture in our schools build those values among our children to value local, and to not just want to eat local, but also produce local. So I do think as part of our building of values among our young, among our children, that our homes and our schools can play an important role. And so some schools have the facility to do gardens, some do not. In other words, some have land, depending on where you are. And I know some schools do have school farms, but many of our schools do not have the wherewithal, the land resource, the availability of land close to the school to be able to do that. So that is a constraining factor. Let's go to our next question. Across the region, the governments keep giving stimulus or incentive to farmers. In dealing closely with farmers, I have realized that most of them do not know their cost of production. Thus, pricing is arbitrary. How does the government then measure incentives given versus production as it relates to food security? So Minister Caesar, I'm going to ask you to comment on that question, if you will. Did you get the question?
Yes, I have the question.
Okay, please.
Yes. The issue of the cost of production in most of the member states, the Ministry of Agriculture will have the numbers, how much it is to produce, for example, a pound of dasheen, a pound of yam. So we have the calculations, and these calculations are provided to the farmers. But I want to agree with the draft of the question that the issue of pricing is done in a way that we have to carefully study going forward. And I'll give an example. And it's very interesting because I think it pertains in all of the member states. Mm-hmm. There is a huge gap between the farm gate and the consumer, the supermarket. And when a product leaves the farm gate, you have multiple operators between the farm gate and the supermarket, and they have different levels of markups. And that changes the price significantly, because when you speak to a farmer in Nevis and you ask him, what did he sell the produce for? And you ask the person who purchases the goods, who's purchasing the goods, what's the price that you bought the produce for? There is a significant difference that we must address. I'll give you an example in Saint Vincent and the Grenadines. If a sack of potato is produced in a rural community, let's use Georgetown for example, and it is bought in Georgetown at the local market, there's one price there. If it is taken to Kingstown, when you compare the price that it is sold for in Georgetown and Kingstown, it is significantly different. Then if you compare the price that a trader who is traded in US currency, who is taking that same sack of potato to the US Virgin Islands or the British Virgin Islands, it's a different price. The trafficker who is taking it to Trinidad and Tobago, who is taking it to a different currency, which comparatively has a significant gap in terms of the value, a different price is paid to the farmer. If the farmer is going to Barbados, a different price. If the farmer is going to the European Union, it's a different price. And you have, in 1 hour, Governor, a single farmer could get 6 different prices from 6 different purchasers moving the same commodity. Therefore, when we speak about the issue of the price, and I realized from the survey which was done, persons are saying that the most important issue is the price and the pricing. We have to come up with a mechanism where we can probably subsidize, probably monitor, probably regulate the variations in prices and pricing between the farm gate and the consumers, because we are leaving it basically to the vagaries of the minds of the operators who are operating within that space, who are speculating. And you know, sometimes a farmer may sell ginger for a particular price, and the ginger goes to Trinidad and Tobago. And the daughter of that farmer is purchasing the Saint Vincent ginger. And when you hear about the increase in the price in the Trinidad and Tobago marketplace, and of course, I'm factoring the transportation costs, costs of shipping, and all these things. But I think that there is a need for us, I don't like to use the word regulate, but to organize in an orderly fashion a management mechanism whereby we can ensure that our speculators do not price themselves out of the market. Because if we price ourselves out of the market, then we will not be able to harness the returns that we can have and the stimulation in the local economy by carving out more of that $1.6 billion. I am certain that when the farmers can make, the speculators can make, and we can attract more consumers to buy locally if we manage this process carefully.
Right. Thank you, Minister, for that. Let me ask the farmers on the panel as well to weigh in on this pricing issue. Ms. Marryshow, what's your view on this matter?
Yes, Governor. I want to support Minister Caesar concerning the pricing. Because, for example, I as a farmer might sell cucumbers at $1 a pound, but a vendor will come to purchase it from me at $1, but I will go to the same vendor half an hour after and they're selling it at $3 per pound. So the vendor always making much more than the farmer. And the thing is that when they come to the farm, they always want a special weight, because when they buy 40 pounds or something, they tell you put something on it. So the something you might put is a 5 pound or 2 pound or so. So there is a very big gap in terms of the farm gate price and the consumer price. And the people that make the bulk of the money from farming is not really the person that produce it, is the vendors and the markup from the supermarkets. So when we said that local produce is high and it's expensive, the expense is not coming from the farmers. It's coming along the channel that purchase it to get it to the consumers.
Right. Thanks for that perspective. Danny, do you want to comment on this as well?
Yes, Governor. Two things. People pricing is what the market can bear. It has nothing to do with cost of production. It's what the market can bear. People are irrational maximizers in the farming business. What happens when someone buys from you a huckster? That person goes and try to get the most money out of the person, out of the people in the market. The second thing is that we are speaking about price, but we understand intermediation or those activities, post-harvest, packaging and marketing and those kind of things. Since I did agricultural science, it was 70% of the price was intermediation, was 70% of the cost. So we must understand that, it's a premium. What persons have done to benefit from that is that they have some vertical integration or they have some value added where they do some retail sale as well as some wholesale sale. So that's the only way a farmer gets to benefit significantly. Or if they have contract, they just work out, listen, my cost of production, which obviously is reasonably low sometimes, and they just sell in enough bulk and they tell themselves, whatever I got is based on my cost of production and that satisfies me. So it is not maximization, but satisfying. So I think one has to understand those kind of things. The two critical factors there. That one is what the market can bear. That's what's going to happen. You have irrational maximizers. They're not rational people in terms of that. They're not saying, well, because you did the planting and you were in the sun and you did the watering and all that kind of thing. No, they come, they negotiate with this, as Sister Marryshow said. They want to put on something because that didn't go down heavy and someone going to want something extra from me. So I think that is what we have to look at. The farmer, has got to work out, listen, what am I willing to accept based on my cost of production? And then after that, you really can't be counting the next man thing when he takes it from your farm. You either have released it and tell yourself that you have cast your bread on the water and you'll get it back because God will help you. Because if you're fair and you believe in karma that they're not fair to you, then I think God will reward you. I'm kind of, you see, farming is a faith profession. You're a man of faith, but I'm telling you, that's where the faith of a farmer comes out. You have to wait for 4 weeks before you get a cucumber. And 2 days before you harvest, you can get a worm that eats off most of these things. Or you can end up having your best tomatoes, and your best tomatoes, you only get $1 a pound for them. And you can have blotched tomatoes, and the people line up by you to pay $6 for them because tomatoes are scarce. So, farming has got many different dimensions. So I think it is important that when we think, one of our aspects of responding to these prices, because prices is one dimension, and the concessions, all of those things, is that what you do is that you look at the stewards, the people who are good stewards, the one who puts the one talent under the step and the one who multiplies the talent. And that is where you're going to get your true results. Just like Esau and Jacob, just like those things in the Bible, biblical things they're there for a purpose. The same thing happens in real life in modern day. Your results would be commensurate with what God wants you to benefit. If you put in the hard work you will have the hurricanes like the other man, but you would be able to generate profits. We had a gentleman in Nevis named Brother Freeman. He was a preacher man, and he was in the market 52 weeks per year. There are other people, they were not preachers, but they were not in the market. And he always had something. He diversified his crop. So he sold he had vegetables, cash vegetables, and he had Amripali mangoes, and he had breadfruit. So what he did, he diversified, and you spread your risk. So there are several ways of dealing with that. You need a cogent policy. Food security has two dimensions. Food security has a policy dimension according to FAO, and it has a production and nutrition dimension. Those are the two aspects. And I think that, this is something, I cannot go into it right now, but I'm sure that, Minister Caesar is aware that that is global, it's regional, and that is the way to respond.
Well, thank you, Pastor Danny, for that sermon on faith by farming. No, it's an interesting perspective, and I hear you, a farmer, you're in the business. I suppose what we're grappling with is how can we make farming more sustainable, agriculture more sustainable, so that while I'm happy to hear more young people are coming in, you did make the point earlier that it's also a psychological issue that farmers could get discouraged based on developments, whether it's a weather event, whether it's pre-deal larceny, or whether it's the returns vis-a-vis the investment, what they put in. And so they want to get a fair shake, I suppose. And to Minister's point earlier, and Ms. Marryshow as well, how do we calibrate it so that, I suppose, they get a fairer shake in the business? The middle agents will do what they do. That's part of their role. And for the small farmers, they can always be producing and also doing the marketing side where they, so they want that help. They want that business partner to take it off their hands. But getting the calibration right. And ultimately, the price that the local, because what it's really all about, this discussion is, how do we get our local people to eat more local food? One of the issues that they're raising is that it is too expensive. And so the question is, how do we get them to eat? Those of us who value local food will make a sacrifice and buy local because we believe in it, we believe it's healthier, and therefore we are prepared to spend to do that. But some of us don't have that option. We want to eat right, but at the end of the day, we do have a budget constraint. And we have to be able to find a way to survive, to eat within the means within our means. So that is really, at heart, what we get in that. So Danny, I want to put it back to you. Yes. How do we get more local? How do we get people to eat more local food?
Governor, in order to get people to eat more local, you see, it's taste and preference, and it is market demand, and it is also supply and demand. You see, one of the challenges of local production is that a lot of persons are rain-fed producers. Luckily, what happened is that our tourist season almost coincides with our rainy season. So that bigger problem is not attendant at that time of the year. But the other part of the year, from March to September, anyone who does farming, that's when you will need to use more water, and water is more expensive. You will need to manage the temperatures, and it means using non-traditional methods, maybe some shade, some ground cover, some mulching, and that's an additional cost. So what one has to understand is that there needs to be a clear understanding from the persons who do the agricultural extension, the person who do method and results demonstration, for the farmers to be able to take and multiply what they have seen through technological packages. That must be something that is there. When you had CAEP and RIKE, regional extension programs, they were those programs which ORD was, at one time was bigger than the Ministry of Agriculture in Saint Vincent, because what happened is that there were a lot of youths who were leading ORD, and they were in the production of ground provision, arrowheads, yam, dashing, tanya, and all sorts of things for export markets. So the thing about it is that people will go where the money is. There are three critical things in farming: consistency, reliability, and price. Now, in order for you to be consistent, it means that you must be able to get in real time the plow to come in to plow your lands, so that you can sequence, whether by the moon or by your schedule, your planting, and that your sequence of production. So for example, if you're planting cucumbers, you have to be aware that when one is about to flower, that you should have a next crop that's at a stage that if your harvesting interval is 2 weeks, 2 weeks after that, you should have your next set of cucumbers to go on the market to be sold. What people do is lottery planting, Governor. So they plant the whole thing, they sell everything one time, you get excited with them, and then they're not around again. You cannot do that. You have to, they requires a certain amount of systematic relationships and so forth. And so those are the kinds of things. And the price, you can level prices when you're consistent. Otherwise, you're going to have these big, gluts and scarcities. When there's plenty, the bottom drops out. And when they're not, you get a real lotto. So I think that it's critically important that we understand that. And then that fairness that you speak about, that's how it goes in farming. In farming, what it is that when you make a lot, you have to put something aside. If you do not do, and then you have to get people to eat more local stuff, because a lot of people have less. People are going to buy what they can afford. And if you can only afford more, if you can have a good enough supply of the items, so that an individual can afford to sell it at a lower price. If it's less that they can produce, it means the price is going to be higher. So I humbly submit that yes, the cost of production and all of those are critical, but you have to make sure that you're consistent. You must make sure that you're reliable, and consistency only comes if you understand scheduling. And reliability comes from the fact that you cannot tell somebody you're there, you have a quality product today, and then they say to you, okay, bring me 20 bags every 2 weeks. The security of land tenure was one of the areas under food insecurity that our good sister wasn't able to deal with. But that also was one of the areas. Because sometimes if you have to buy land to do farming, it's very, very expensive. So it is important that, like I said, this is something that requires, and I've always suggested, if people are really interested in dealing with food security, what is going to be happening is that there need to be a meeting of the minds of someplace, of technicians, not politicians and so forth on this particular matter. Because what happened is that agriculture have the most different specialization. You have soil scientists, you have agronomists, you have hydrologists, you have plant protectionists, you have animal husbandry, you have all kind of things, right. Plant entomologists. But what you need to do is that there need to be an integrated approach where the policy people sit down with them and so forth, and then decide strategic planning, just like any other entity, and then come up with something that has worked in the past, because nothing is new on the face of the earth, and see how it can be done using advanced technology, using digitalization and so forth, to make people to educate and to make people aware, and to allow them to be able to do trading on that kind of platform without having to go on site to see it.
Right. Thank you for that, Danny. And I will also thank you for that as your wrap-up comments. And clearly, we need more time to further explore this. But thank you very much for your insights as a farmer entrepreneur, because you actually live in it. Ms. Marryshow, and then Minister Caesar for your final thoughts. Ms. Marryshow, what would you like to say in closing?
Okay, in closing, I would like to say that I would like to see every Grenadian get back into eating local. Local is healthy, it's nutritious, you know what you are eating, you know the people that are planting it, you know the farmers, you know the youths or whoever doing it. So I would really like to see the country go on creating an awareness, using all aspects of social media so that we can get Grenadians and the other regions to go back into planting and eating local, healthy, nutritious food. In so doing, we're able to have a healthy nation and we're able to fight all the disease and disasters that might come our way. Thank you.
Thank you, well said. And Minister Caesar, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I must say that this engagement was very interesting, and it is well established that necessity is the mother of all inventions. The people of the sub-region, we have worked together over the last months to ensure that we emerge from this pandemic stronger, and that we have a stronger agriculture sector with a roadmap. And I want to thank you, Governor, for what I consider to be the marching orders. We have a clear goal, a clear objective and ambition leading this conversation, and all the citizens who are listening and will listen to this dialogue. There is a $1.6 billion food import bill. The future of the OECS, the future of agriculture in our member states will depend heavily on us coming up with a framework as to how we are going to carve out a significant percentage of that to ensure that we increase employment, that we have greater exports from the sub-region, and that we create more opportunities to have an exceptional cadre of young entrepreneurs who are convinced that they can produce goods because there is a market and excellent prices will be available. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Nice way to wrap it up. And so all I will say is a hearty thank you to our panelists. We had a policymaker and we had two farmers. So we were not in any way theoretical about this discussion. It was practical. People who are in the business, both in policy and in practice. And so I want to thank you very much for your contributions to this dialogue. We listened to you. My team listened to you. The region heard you. And I can tell you, certainly from an ECCB perspective, that in our program of action for recovery, resilience, and transformation, and this is a 3-year program that we're working on now to support the region's recovery from this pandemic. Food security is in there, and we are going to draw on some of the insights we gleaned tonight to further enrich our submission on this particular area. One of which, of course, is the notion of, or the target of perhaps looking at a 25% reduction in our food import bill over the next 3 years. And we want to work very closely with the minister and his team across the OECS, with the OECS Commission, and of course, our farmers and various stakeholders to achieve that target. I want to make a call for everyone to recommit themselves to supporting local agriculture. This is a time for regional solidarity. This is a time for us to stand together, and standing together also means that we need to eat local. I want to encourage our young people who are looking at the opportunities and are scratching their heads and wondering, from when shall my bread come? How will I survive? To look again at the real possibilities in the agri-sector area in this period. We did not go into it tonight, but there are some support initiatives through the development banks, through the partial credit guarantee, scheme which we will launch later on this month, where potentially there could be support for people in the business of agribusiness, food production, among others. And so we believe that there will be support there for you as well. For those who are doing their backyard gardening, we want to encourage you to do that. Draw on the Love Box initiative, see how we could make that our own in our own different countries. And I like the idea of coming up with a bundle that works for our health. So that I heard the minister say they're targeting diabetes. Obviously, we need to target hypertension, heart disease, those chronics, which are such a challenge for us in our region. And it is so important at a time when we're talking about health insurance. We know the high cost of healthcare and the prohibitive cost of health insurance. And it goes back to this issue of primary healthcare, and eating local is part of that. So again, let's connect the dots, join up our efforts, and make our region more food secure. Finally, I'd like to thank all our listeners and viewers who joined us and stay with us for the last 2 hours in this dialogue. We appreciate your presence and your interest in this very important subject. I also wish to thank my colleagues at the Central Bank who supported the production of this event. It starts with Dr. Emefa Suador, who is our coordinator of the dialogues. Emefa works out of my office. Then we have also Mr. Alston Crawford, Ms. Karina Summersall, Philip Summersall, Shana Daniel, Marlon Bristol, Marlon Davis, Ayodele Roche, who worked on the Mentimeter, and also Mikla Swift, who was also supporting us, looking at what was happening on Facebook and in the room, Zoom room. So all of my colleagues, wherever you are, and of course our partner radio and television stations, thank you very much, everyone. Remember, this is a moment of challenge, but it is also a moment of opportunity. We are in this together, and if we stand together, we will overcome together. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Good night.